An investigation surrounding an area utility company's questionable spending resulted in bombshell announcements today by federal investigators.
Now, this after two former vice presidents at Bristol Virginia Utilities pleaded guilty today in a public corruption case detailing how they lined their pockets with thousands of dollars.
News Channel 11's community watchdog Nate Morabito broke the news this morning and delivered up-to-the-minute facts from the federal courthouse in Abingdon. The U.S. Attorney's Office said BVU's former vice president Jim Kelly Jr. and his replacement David Copeland were involved in a deceptive kickback scheme by approving fake invoices for work that was never completed.
News Channel 11 is in your corner with team coverage of today's guilty pleas and reaction from BVU. We begin with Nate Morabito, who's live in Abingdon tonight.
These two former executives of BVU basically admitted today, over an 8-year period from 2006 to the end of 2014, that they approved bogus invoices for a company based out of South Carolina. That unnamed South Carolina business basically billed BVU for services it never provided. It received grant and ratepayer money and then passed along some of that money to these executives in the form of big kickbacks. They now have to give those kickbacks back to the court. In addition, they have to pay a combined $470,000 in restitution. Not only that, when they're sentenced on June 18th, they could face up to a $250,000 fine and spend 5 years in prison.
There's nobody guarding the hen house, then the fox is going to get the hens. And that's what I think happened.
BVU board member Doug Fleener shared his surprise outside of federal court Thursday. More than a year after first questioning the lack of oversight at the public utility, today he learned his hunch all along turned out to be true.
People that have public jobs or good benefits jobs don't need to take advantage of the hardworking people in this area, and that's what they've done.
Just hours prior, Jim Kelly walked out of these doors after the former BVU vice president admitted he approved $330,000 worth of fake invoices for an unnamed company so he could collect $160,000 in kickbacks.
Jim deeply regrets, accepts full responsibility for his conduct, and looks forward to putting this matter behind him.
Not long after, David, would you like to say anything about today's guilty plea? His successor pleaded guilty to carrying on Kelly's criminal tradition. David Copeland, who resigned last month, admitted to deceptively allowing BVU to pay out $144,000 in contracts to the same South Carolina business for work the business never completed. And all along, Copeland lined his pockets with tens of thousands of dollars in kickbacks, too.
For approximately 4 years, Mr. Copeland used the billing process as a personal piggy bank.
Fueled by greed, the federal government says the two former BVU executives cheated taxpayers and ratepayers.
It's not just a matter of the public funds being taken, but it really does go to shaking the public confidence.
And they acknowledged Operation Electric Boogaloo doesn't end here. But they couldn't answer if BVU's former CEO, Wes Rosenbaum, will face charges as well. He resigned back in 2013.
If you'll be patient with us and stuff, those answers will be forthcoming down the road.
Fleener is confident there will be more federal charges. He says others played a role in the public corruption at BVU.
If it makes everything better, and if you serve the public, work for the public, then maybe this is going to be a lesson to people that you don't steal from the public.
Fleener also sparked that local investigation into BVU. I just confirmed 15 minutes ago with the Commonwealth Attorney Nicole Price. That local investigation is still active and ongoing, and she told me very early on in their investigation they noticed public corruption, they noticed some other federal issues and got the federal government involved. That's why we're here today. We mentioned the former CEO. What does the new CEO have to say about today's news? Let's send it over to Kylie McGivern, who's live at Bristol Virginia Utilities headquarters in Bristol, Virginia.
Nate, I spoke with customers at BVU ahead of today's hearing today where they were talking about really addressing some of these concerns that you just mentioned. And earlier, Don Bowman, now he is the president and CEO of BVU, and he addressed the concerns the community must be facing. Now, when I talked with folks when they were coming in and out, paying their bills as it is the end of the month, they said some were surprised that someone at that level would really think that they can get away with such crimes.
While our rates may fluctuate in the future, it will not be due to the actions of these individuals.
The president of a Columbia, South Carolina-based telecommunications company recently resigned as that business cooperates the ongoing federal investigation that involves Bristol Virginia Utilities. Nate Morabito continues to uncover new information about the public corruption case involving that public utility.
The two former BVU vice presidents pleaded guilty to approving nearly $500,000 in fake invoices for a Columbia, South Carolina business for work that business never completed. In return, the former BVU executives collected hefty illegal kickbacks. Federal prosecutors and BVU refused to name that company, citing the ongoing federal investigation. So we decided to find out who BVU contracted with from Columbia, South Carolina in the past. We quickly honed in on this company, Edwards Telecommunications Incorporated. Today we asked the company's attorney about the BVU investigation, and here's what Mark Moore told us. Quote, "I can tell you we're aware of this federal investigation, and we're aware of this federal investigation because we've been cooperating with this federal investigation since the summer of last year," end quote. Not only that, he said the president of Edwards Telecommunications, Todd Edwards, recently resigned. In addition, Moore told us the company and its employees, including that past president, Todd Edwards, are cooperating. Now, according to federal court documents I just reviewed a short time ago in the BVU case, a man by the name of James Todd Edwards will enter a guilty plea in a related case.
Now, 4 people have pleaded guilty in connection to the Bristol Virginia Utilities' ongoing investigation of corruption. Today, 2 contractors admitted their role in a fraud scheme. Thanks for choosing News Channel 11 at 5 o'clock today. I'm Josh Smith.
And I'm Sarah Diamond. Good evening. This comes a week and a half after 2 of the former BVU vice presidents pleaded guilty to federal conspiracy charges.
Yeah, it's an ongoing story revealed through court documents. Both ex-employees approved false invoices for work that was never completed. But today's guilty pleas came from a former South Carolina and Georgia contractor. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, mail fraud, tax fraud, and money laundering were some of the charges that were brought up at federal court in Abingdon today. And News Channel 11's community watchdog, Nate Morabito, is there live. He's actually at BVU.
And Nate, who were these men and what did you find out about them?
Hey, Josh and Sarah, these were both longtime contractors with Bristol Virginia Utilities. Their contracts continued up until March of this year when both were terminated. And talking to people that are working here at Bristol Virginia Utilities, they tell me these 2 men were both well respected and well liked. And when they actually did their work, were really good at what they did. That's where the problem lied in all of this, though. They filed fake invoices for work they never completed. And in return, they got a paycheck, and they gave kickbacks to 2 former vice presidents of Bristol Virginia Utilities. Let's start with James Todd Edwards. He's from Columbia, South Carolina. He was the president and CEO of Edwards Telecommunications until a few weeks ago. That's what we reported. We spoke with the attorney of that company last month, who told us they had been cooperating with this federal investigation since last summer. Now, he's accused of not only providing cash kickbacks, but also promising a backhoe and hunting trips out of the continental U.S. to one of the former vice presidents. Then there's Michael Clark. He lived in Georgia, but Monday through Thursday every week, he was generally here in Bristol, Virginia. If you factored in his mileage, his hotel stipend, and his pay, BVU CEO Don Bowman tells me this man took in $132,000 a year, one of the highest paid people here at BVU. Now, together, they were in charge of 383 miles of fiber optic cable, running them through Southwest Virginia thanks to federal and state grants. Now, Clark would design the job. We're told Edwards would actually complete the job. Executives and top-level people here at BVU tell us these men were good people who made some bad choices. They were so good at what they did. Mike Bundy, the former CEO of BVU, just renewed Clark's contract last October.
There's kind of disbelief that someone was able to organize and steal this amount of money.
A ticket to the Bristol Motor Speedway used to be one of the hardest things to find.
Yeah, but it did not stop Bristol Virginia Utilities from buying 140 of those tickets over a period of 5 years. A community watchdog investigations found the price tag on that, $45,000.
And 3 of the last 4 board chairmen say they had no clue about the purchases.
Well, this is federal prosecutors continue their investigation into corruption involving BVU. Nate Morabito made yet another discovery about the utilities past.
The high banks, the short track, the action. Documents reveal Bristol Virginia Utilities spent $45,000 on Bristol Motor Speedway race tickets from 2008 to 2013, buying 140 tickets in all. Records show the most recent ones from 2013 included 10 in Allison Terrace near the start-finish line and 14 more in Pearson Terrace in Turn 1.
It's robbery. It's robbery. You're robbing your customers.
BVU ratepayer Willetta Jackson.
I think it's utterly ridiculous
and her husband, Edward, were already frustrated about BVU's past.
Makes me angry because it's something we had no control over.
Then we showed them these documents.
$45,728. That's more than most people make a year.
It's the latest expense they're left questioning.
I don't understand why. I mean, what would they gain by shelling out tickets?
Documents show the utility opted against renewing its BMS season ticket packages in October 2013. Not long after the Sheriff's Department opened a criminal investigation.
I need to be looking at every single expense.
Around the same time, Mike Bundy took over as interim CEO and instituted what he called a culture change. This is what he told us in March 2014.
I'll be the first to admit that our discretionary spending needed reined in, and I'm proud to say it has been reined in, and we've continued that trend for 5 months.
Bundy, who left BVU last year, told us recently by email he was the one who canceled the race tickets. The reason? When the invoice came across his desk, he didn't see the return on the investment or the business value in buying them. His successor, Don Bowman, told us he supports Bundy's decision and has no intention of buying race tickets again in the future. So why did the utility buy the tickets in the first place, and who used them? It's still unclear if any employees or board members used the tickets. 3 of the last 4 BVU board chairmen told us they didn't even realize the utility bought season passes to BMS. Only one said he was aware. Former board chair Paul Hurley declined an on-camera interview for this story, but he said those tickets were for economic development, an opportunity to try and lure investors to do business in Bristol, Virginia, using the hottest ticket in town. Hurley couldn't name any specific success stories, but he told us to this day he still thinks it was a good use of money. He suggested the tickets were likely used for customer appreciation as well, and said he never used those tickets.
Nate Morabito continues to dig for answers. He asked leaders to explain their decision.
Josh, it's a decision they debated behind closed doors this morning. Doug Fleener, who's known to be outspoken, told me weeks ago because he was the whistleblower who alerted police and sparked those 2 investigations, he knew there was a chance he wouldn't be reappointed when his term expired on June 30th. Well, turns out he was right.
No, I'm not chilling out. Don't ever tell me to do anything.
During Doug Fleener's 5 years on the BVU board, his aggressive, abrasive style made him a friend of the ratepayer but a foe of others. By alerting police about past issues at the public utility, he indirectly helped change leadership here and helped return hundreds of thousands of dollars.
These changes wouldn't have been made. This money wouldn't have come back. I don't think I could do another 5 years and make the contribution in that fact alone that I've made in these past 5 years.
Today, his service ended. Following an executive session behind closed doors, city council members appointed someone else to the BVU board. Doesn't it look bad not to reappoint the guy that blew the whistle on this in the first place?
I think it does, but that wasn't the will of the council.
New mayor Archie Hubbard says he wanted to reappoint Fleener to the post, but the majority had different plans.
It was a decision that our council made. I don't think it sends the wrong message. I appreciate his time serving on the board.
Why the change? Was it because some see Fleener as disruptive?
I would not comment on that.
I have no comment about that.
Councilman Guy Odom says the decision had nothing to do with Fleener's personality. Instead, it was about considering different candidates, people he says who are more qualified and have good business sense.
You put people on the board who you think are the best qualified to take that board to the future and do the best job for this city.
A federal judge recently said there was an epidemic of corruption at BVU. Councilman Bill Hartley argues a new person with new ideas is a good thing.
I appreciate Doug's service and what he's done, but I think, to get beyond this, that sometimes you need to just put new faces on the board and not have the same people there.
Was it your personality that did you in?
Oh, I don't know.
Fleener says he doesn't know exactly why it came to this, but he's holding his head high.
If you can't, be voted up or down based on what you've accomplished, what you've done, what you stand for, you know, that's ridiculous.
Just 3 weeks before the resignation of former Bristol Virginia Utilities president and CEO Wes Rosenbaum, public records reveal the utility returned several NFL tickets a longtime BVU vendor requested on Rosenbaum's behalf. Good evening, I'm Sarah Diamond.
And I'm Josh Smith. The reason the $1,200 worth of tickets violated BVU's gifts and entertainment policy. Community watchdog Nate Morabito found out that was not the first time Rosenbaum scored tickets to big-time sporting events.
Yeah, listen to this. A month prior, in August 2013, emails reveal Rosenbaum secured 8 tickets to a Cincinnati Reds game, and another 10 tickets to a Kentucky Wildcats football game made their way to BVU. In 2011, he arranged for 5 tickets to a UK basketball game, and one of the people who secured some of the tickets for him is the president of a Bristol company that did big business with BVU.
As Dalton leaves the pocket and dives. The ball comes out.
In a year when the Cincinnati Bengals made the NFL playoffs, BVU's former CEO just barely missed out on a chance to see them in action during the regular season. In the weeks before that game, Wes Rosenbaum had one foot out the door, was about to receive a nearly $270,000 severance package, and new leadership was taking over.
Were there areas that needed to be fixed? Absolutely.
When then Chief Operating Officer Mike Bundy found these 6 tickets addressed to Rosenbaum, he promptly returned them, citing the utility's gifts and entertainment policy. But emails reveal that wasn't the first time Rush Powers, president of Burke Powers and Hardy Insurance, secured tickets for Rosenbaum. In August, Powers, whose tagline asks, "Have I done everything that I can to earn your referral business?" gave Rosenbaum baseball tickets for another soon-to-be playoff team.
They have clinched at least a tie for a postseason berth.
The Cincinnati Reds. In an email, Rosenbaum later thanked Powers for getting the tickets, saying the kids really enjoyed the game. Turns out, according to public records, the family-owned company, which also employs his wife, the mayor of Bristol, Tennessee, received $1.8 million in BVU business from 2010 to 2014. The insurance agency's attorney told us today, because of the ongoing federal investigation into BVU, officers of Burke, Powers, and Hardy may or may not be called as a witness for the government. Because of that possibility, he said it'd be inappropriate to make any comment at this time regarding the agency's relationship and or business dealings with BVU, its officers, and employees. But he did say they would be willing to talk after the investigation is over. We found out the insurance agent wasn't the only one who scored gifts for Rosenbaum and his family. BVU records reveal a third-party vendor that sold ads for the utility and split the revenue secured Rosenbaum tickets to see his alma mater play basketball in 2011, the season the University of Kentucky won the national championship. At the time, Rosenbaum told Via Media he was excited to take his older kids to the game because it would bring back some great memories. We know Rosenbaum made an effort to pay for those tickets. He told the rep because BVU had a request for proposal out with the company, he felt it would be inappropriate to accept the tickets as a gift. So to be prudent, he mailed off a $175 check. But a memo reveals the representative later said he couldn't accept the money since he didn't pay for the tickets in the first place. Rosenbaum also wrote a $200 check in 2012. This one addressed to Burke, Powers, and Hardy to cover another set of Bengals tickets. Although BVU's gift policy warns about accepting gifts that may be viewed as influential, Rosenbaum's payment effectively allowed him to get around part of the policy, which limits gifts to $500 or less.
Do you think that $500 cap, considering the circumstances these days, is too high?
Yeah, I think it'll be going down.
New CEO Don Bowman expects BVU to change its gift policy soon.
We're going to modify our gift policy to conform with the new rules the state of Virginia passed.
Those rules limit gifts for top state officials to $100. Although BVU isn't necessarily required to adopt the new, more restrictive rules, Bowman says this is just one more way the utility can secure the public's trust.
We want to make sure that we conduct ourselves in a manner that we can all be proud of.
Lavish gifts and deals that resulted in thousands of dollars for several former employees of Bristol Virginia Utilities, and that resulted in a guilty plea by the man who once held the top leadership role at BVU, their former CEO. Good evening, I'm Sarah Diamond.
And I'm Josh Smith. The ongoing public corruption case of Bristol Virginia Utilities will land another person in prison, a former contractor who hoped a judge would show him some leniency in federal court today. James Todd Edwards admitted to giving kickbacks kickbacks to certain BVU employees, all in return for approved fake invoices. Our community watchdog Nate Morabito was in federal court all day and joins us live tonight in Abingdon.
Nate, some harsh words by the judge and the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Yeah, the federal judge continues to say there was an epidemic of corruption at BVU, and federal prosecutors say Wes Rosenbaum played a big role in that. You know, September marks 2 years since the BVU board approved a severance for Wes Rosenbaum, a $269,000 severance with the terms that he not discuss what led up to his resignation. Well, today in federal court, he started talking. I didn't say much, but he did admit in federal court to accepting gifts and money and requesting those gifts and money from BVU vendors who told prosecutors they felt they had to give those gifts and that money to keep their contracts and to keep their business with BVU. Now, our investigation just last week, you'll recall, revealed that Rosenbaum, over the last few years of his employment, received several big name sporting event tickets, including tickets to the University of Kentucky basketball game. Today, the feds say the University of Kentucky basketball game tickets are among the gifts he received.
While ratepayers struggled to pay their bills, the utility had no trouble spending thousands of dollars on the equivalent of a photo op. It's the latest questionable expense involving Bristol Virginia Utilities uncovered by our community watchdog. And wait until you see who's pictured in that photo. BVU remains the focus of a federal corruption investigation, an investigation that's already resulted in guilty pleas for 5 people, 3 former executives and 2 contractors. Long before the feds started their investigation, execs and board members were all smiles, particularly in 2010 when they traveled to Richmond to celebrate their independence from the city of Bristol. But as News Channel 11's Nate Morabito found out, some customers won't be smiling after they find out how much that celebration cost.
Kelly, after we raised questions about that cost, one board member promised to pay for his part of that day trip. The trip was meant to celebrate BVU becoming its own authority, separate from the control of the city of Bristol. A moment some argue helped pave the way for the widespread corruption at the utility.
This has been done, right or wrong, it was done.
What's the goal here? What are we trying to accomplish?
Some of the discussion is that he is going to be sentenced.
Every time BVU board members talk about the ongoing federal corruption investigation,
Comprehensive review of Wes's severance package,
this photo hangs over them.
I hate to look at it.
The picture features former CEO Wes Rosenbaum, guilty of federal corruption charges. The utility's CFO, not charged with any crime, but labeled by prosecutors as co-conspirator number 1. Her attorney says she's innocent. Also in the frame, BVU's former attorney, past and present board members, and others. And then there's former Governor Bob McDonnell, front and center, guilty of unrelated corruption charges.
It is a symbol of what's wrong.
And not only is it still hanging in the boardroom, other versions hang in a hallway and at BVU's customer entrance. Receipts reveal ratepayers paid almost $700 to print and frame the ceremonial photos. The frames cost $642.
Holy cow. That's ludicrous.
But that's just part of the big picture. Records show BVU spent almost $6,000 in all before and after the snapshot.
I had no idea that we were going to pay that kind of exorbitant cost. That's the kind of thing that shouldn't happen.
And that was a lot of money spent.
Board member Guy Odom is bothered by our discovery. Yet another example of unnecessary spending. This coming from a city councilman who's taken part in a bill signing before, just down the road at the Falls Development with current Governor Terry McAuliffe.
All we had to do was set up a tent and a little bit of food, and the governor came to town. So I think we could have had the governor down here, done the same thing here in this building.
But BVU didn't invite the governor here. Instead, while Odom and concerned citizens drove to Richmond to urge lawmakers to keep BVU under the control of the city of Bristol, an effort that failed, BVU bypassed the 5-hour road trip and chartered a plane, like this one, to celebrate its independence, 6 months after the governor officially signed the BVU Authority bill into law. Chairman Jim Clifton was on that December 2010 flight.
Go up and spend the night with each person, either traveling as a group or traveling individually. And when comparing the cost, I think I guess Wes Rosenbaum at the time made a decision that we would just fly up.
According to BVU records, the plane alone cost almost $5,000.
The first time that I ever heard about $4,800 is when you asked me.
Knowing what you know now, don't you wish you never took that trip?
Oh, gosh, yes. If I could take that trip back, it's one of the lowest points of my life to realize that I was that naive.
Back then, Doug Fleener was newly appointed to the BVU board.
I also thought at the time that it was actually actual bill signing.
Turns out that wasn't the only thing he was wrong about.
A source was going to let us use their plane, is how it was described to me.
In the 5 years since, he's made some big realizations about BVU's past practices.
I was duped.
Back in Richmond, records reveal the group enjoyed a more than $300 meal at an Italian restaurant.
Alcohol served?
Yes.
What kind of alcohol?
Whatever you wanted.
Fleener was the first board member to talk to the authorities about the questionable practices at BVU. And now he wants to make things right in this case.
It makes you realize you're not perfect and makes you realize you can make mistakes in judgment.
He says he'll pay for his portion of the trip and even amend his tax returns if necessary.
I'll pay for my mistake. Everybody else needs to own theirs.
As for that picture he hates to look at,
it's a disgrace. I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed.
Fleener says he used to have a personal copy, but has since ripped it to shreds. He wishes BVU would take down its copies of that photo, too.
We bring you team coverage of the latest developments of the Bristol Virginia Utilities public corruption investigation. Today, a federal grand jury indicted BVU Chief Financial Officer Stacey Pomrenke. The federal court documents show the jury indicted Pomrenke on several charges, including conspiracy to defraud the United States, interference with commerce by threat or violence, as well as attempt and conspiracy to commit fraud. Nate Morabito is standing by in our studio with a major announcement about what happened in court today for a former mayor and BVU board chairman. But first, let's check in with Curtis McLeod, who just spoke with the folks at BVU about Pomrenke's indictment.
Yeah, I did just speak with representatives here at the BVU. That's where we're live now in Bristol, Virginia. And we've been going through this 22-page document, this indictment, this federal indictment. Now, we had the opportunity to speak with officials here. They tell us it's just been a whirlwind day, and they're still trying to figure out what to do. Let's take that sound.
At this point, we're kind of in a holding pattern until we understand exactly what we're dealing with.
Thanks, Curtis. Now, we reached out to Pomrenke's attorneys after our investigation this summer identified her as a co-conspirator. We have not received a response back to her indictment, but here's what her attorneys told us back in August. They said, quote, "We emphatically state that she has done nothing criminally wrong and is innocent of any of the allegations being made," end quote. In another big BVU development today, he was supposed to give away dozens of Bristol Motor Speedway race tickets to potential businesses in hopes those companies would relocate to Bristol. Instead, a former mayor and Bristol Virginia Utilities board chairman sold those NASCAR tickets to pad his pockets. And not only that, Paul Hurley then lied about it to a federal grand jury. The former mayor and BVU board member pleaded guilty to mail fraud and perjury this morning in federal court as part of the ongoing BVU corruption investigation. Nate Morabito found out it's all linked back to those BMS race tickets we told you about back in April, tickets BVU bought under the Wes Rosenbaum administration.
Sarah, remember, those race tickets were supposed to be for economic development. Paul Hurley told us as much back in April when we questioned him about the race tickets, but he couldn't name any specific success stories at the time. It turns out not only did he lie to us about what he did with those tickets, he lied under oath to a federal grand jury. Paul Hurley walked out of federal court Monday guilty of mail fraud and perjury, all connected to his role as a former board member and board chairman of Bristol Virginia Utilities. Would you like to say anything about your guilty plea?
No, won't say anything.
It wasn't so much what Hurley didn't say today, it's what he did say 3 months prior in front of a grand jury, a blatant lie. He told grand jurors he couldn't recall if he ever sold any race tickets, tickets he should have been giving away to prospective companies. He's since admitted he sold roughly 50 tickets to friends and scalpers so he could make money, at least $5,000 worth.
He certainly didn't help himself by not being forthright with the grand jury. And again, he was held accountable for that.
Just hours after his guilty plea, his picture still hanging on the walls of BVU, the BVU board met for its monthly meeting. And during that meeting, board members didn't mention a single word about Hurley.
It's another black eye.
But away from the board meeting, whistleblower Doug Fleener had plenty to say.
Am I shocked? No. Did I suspect it? Yes. This is the man that in a BVU meeting, he sat beside me, and he looks at another board member when I was asking questions a couple, 3 years ago.
and saying, I told you we shouldn't have put him on this board.
Hurley is a man who spent almost half of his life in public service, most recently as a BVU board member and mayor. Before that, as a teacher and school administrator.
We're talking about a former educator who was supposed to teach our children. We're talking about someone that was mayor of Bristol, Virginia for a long period of time.
Mr. Hurley has forfeited a lot of his goodwill. He's forfeited his integrity. He's forfeited his standing in the community. It's a steep price to pay for a relatively small gain.
The 74-year-old Hurley will likely spend even more time in public buildings in the future. A federal judge will sentence him here in January, and he could face up to 25 years in prison.